and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, Claire. So as I mentioned, why another parenting book? There's a bevy of options out there.
Right.
Why Claire Lerner, and why is my child in charge?
So the reason is because I see hundreds of families a year who come to me for consultation, and the lion's share are parents who have read all the really, really excellent parenting books out there. But they are still resorting to tactics that they know are not necessarily helpful or developmentally appropriate, like yelling and bribing and negotiating and bargaining and threatening and cajoling and sort of all sorts of tactics to try and get their kids to cooperate. They are still using them even though it's not what they want to do or they necessarily think is the most helpful. So as we started to peel back the layers of these tricky encounters with their kids, I felt like I had identified a key foundational issue that were leading parents down this path that actually, in many cases, only increased rather than decreased power struggles. And it was a set of mindsets, faulty mindsets, I would say, sort of the lens through which parents were interpreting the situation and reacting to the situation that was getting them into trouble, right? So, and I know we'll spend a lot of time going into those, but like at a cellular level, feeling like a tantrum, especially an epic level tantrum, is sort of inherently harmful for your child to be in that level of distress. And so setting and keeping to a limit became very, very difficult because they actually felt like they were harming their child in some way. And if you feel like you're doing something harmful, it's going to be very, very hard to set that limit, right? Or feeling like a child was misbehaving on purpose and therefore taking sort of harsh, punitive tactics and doing a lot of sort of negative consequences and shaming. You know, why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? Why do you want to hurt mommy? Nobody's going to want to play with you if you push them. Because at a gut level, they feel like the child's doing it on purpose and that they have the ability to stop it, right? So the key mind shifts in those situations are tantrums. The distress of not getting what you want when you want it is not harmful to children. It's part of the growth process, right? So if you do a loving bedtime routine and your child's still not happy about it, by the way, like what kid ever says, Mom, it's, enough books, enough songs, it's really time for my mind and my body to get sleep, right? Like in 33 years of practice, I've never seen that happen. So you have to know that the limit is loving, and that the distress your child experiences in learning to manage that separation is where the resilience and grit is built. And once you set the clear boundary and your child then has adapted because they now understand where the limit is and they respect it, bedtime all of a sudden becomes loving instead of stressful. And for many parents, I see like the bedtime routine is the most coveted part of their day. It's the time when they're bonding and connecting, and family after family was coming in like with these epic battles going on for hours and kids going to bed way too late and parents not getting the rest that they needed. You could see the cascade of stress and challenge and parents really hating on their kids and feeling really frustrated. Once we go through these mindsets and make the mind shifts, we're able to put in place a plan that is loving and has the appropriate boundaries and help parents stick to them. And then they actually are the parent they want to be. So we actually get mean as parents when we don't have boundaries, because that's when things fall off the rails and we start hating on our kids for not getting with the program, right? So what I'm saying is that these 8 mindsets were the key to opening up a whole new roadmap for parents. And I felt like that was additive to the library of parenting books. And the other thing I'll say quickly, Paige, is that the structure of the book is quite different than most parenting books. So it's not heavy on theory, because there's great books on brain development and child development theory. It's very practical. So each chapter, like the chapter on tantrums, starts with the case, and there's many in each chapter because there's not a one size fits all approach. So it's what the parent came in with, right? Like the presenting problem, the mindsets we identified that were getting in the way of their responding more effectively, the mind shifts they made, right? Limits are loving, giving clear directions is helpful, not harmful, and so forth. Then the plan we made to address the issue and the outcome. And the outcomes are messy, right? Like it doesn't always work the first time. And it literally reveals the entire process I take parents through to solve their own challenges. And so that to me also was different, because many parents come to see me and they're like, it's all great, they're learning a lot, and then they turn the next page like, now what? And it's not there. And so I feel like I'm filling that gap. So that's my very long-winded answer to your question.
It's a great answer though. And I appreciate it, because at least in OT and what we do at Skills on the Hill with our clients, we tend to focus a lot on what's happening with the child in those moments. And that's important, right? Managing the sensory environment, understanding the child, and teaching children to manage their responses. But I think a lot of times we forget, what about the parents? Where's our roadmap to how we're supposed to react and act in these situations? How do we manage our own environment to respond appropriately in the way that we want to? So I really got a lot out of that too, reading through the book and in consulting with you in the past. So excited to share the mind shifts and the mindsets with parents. Can you give us a little bit of background about this framework? It really is kind of a neat word, and the mindset, kind of just as a buzzword, really spoke to me. So I'm hoping you could share a little bit more about exactly what a mindset is.
Right. So a mindset is, the way I see it as, and let me say that, it's really because I started to do all these home visits and also get lots of video during COVID of parents interact. Like they would send me video of some of their most challenging moments, and then we talk about it. We look at it together, we reflect on it. And as I'm asking parents, ooh, what happened there? What made it hard for you to stick with that important limit, that there wasn't going to be another half hour of screen time, or that was the last book? And that's when I started to happen upon, there were mindsets at play that were directly connected to what they did next, right? So the mindset is the lens through which parents are interpreting and reacting to these situations. So I'll take you through them. I'll try and do it quickly because there's 8 of them. And then maybe we can go in, like we can talk about some cases in depth, and then we should definitely, have time for Q&A. So the first mindset is what I already mentioned, which is, my child is misbehaving on purpose. He should be able to accept limits and exert greater self-control. Okay. The mind shift is, my child is driven by his emotions and desires and needs help to learn to follow rules and cope with frustration and disappointment, right? Because what we know is that, like, the misbehavior is the delta between the expectation the adult has and the child's ability to deal with that expectation, to meet that expectation, to make a transition, to manage saying goodnight and learning how to put themselves to sleep, right? So there's a delta there, and it's about helping your child learn. If you see it as misbehavior, you are much more likely to be harsh and punitive, which almost always increases the power struggle, right? You get revved up, the kid gets more revved up, and there's lots of brain science that shows that that escalation is very detrimental and actually reduces any chance of healthy problem solving. So if you understand that it's a skill that your child needs to learn, and you see it more through a teaching lens, you're going to react in a way sort of like this, okay? An example in the book is a dad who takes his daughter to the pool, and it's a joyful experience until it's time to go every single time. And every time, and she runs away, swims away, and refuses to come out, and he tries everything, right? He tries bribery, he tries threats, he uses logic. You know, if we don't get out of the pool, we're not going to have enough time to play at home. And all of these tactics to try and get her to change her mind. And I'm going to now tell you that what I'm about to say is another key mindset, which is he's totally focused on controlling her. He's trying hope against hope that one of these strategies is going to move her to say, you know, I should get out of the pool right now because I really do want the extra candy after dinner. But what if those tactics don't work? I have so many kids who are like, don't care about the candy, and they swim away, right? So when you're using those kinds of tactics, they're all predicated on the child ultimately either being cowed by the threat or intrigued by the reward, but it's left in their hands ultimately. So the mind shift for that one is, the mindset is, I can control my child and I should be able to basically make my child do something. And the mind shift is, you have zero control over your child. One of the most humbling things nobody ever tells you, but they're human beings. Like, what comes out of their voices and what comes out of what they do with their bodies, you have no control over. The control you have is of the situation, right? So he can't literally like make his child come out of the pool. He's trying to coerce her. But what he can do is say, Paige, I know it's so hard to leave the pool. So now I'm thinking mind shift. She's not doing this on purpose to drive me crazy. She's having a hard time moving from a really fun activity and making a transition. So I'm going to show empathy for that and then set an appropriate limit. So now he's not harsh and aggressive. He sees this as typical, to be expected. He acknowledges how hard it is. What child would want to get out of a pool to go home and, you know, get ready for dinner? And so he acknowledges that. Then the next mind shift is moving away from trying to get her to change her behavior to him doing something to scaffold that experience to move them along. So in this case, it's, Paige, I know it's really tough, but it's time to get out. You have two great choices. You can be totally in charge. By the way, see, I use my words very carefully, right? Which is, she wants to be in control. And so the setup is, if you want to be in charge, then you could get out of the pool, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You know, you put on a little timer and you say, this is all the time you have to choose to get out of the pool on your own, right? You can give them a 5-minute warning, show them the timer and say that's one great option. If you choose not to do that, no problem. I'll need to take you out. It may feel really uncomfortable to you and to me, but we have to go. Like, we are going to leave when the timer goes off. You decide. So you have to have an end game, right? Because otherwise you're leaving the outcome in your child's hands. And that's what I was seeing over and over again, is parents were getting really frustrated, really angry, hating on their kids. What's wrong with you? You're so spoiled. We've been at the pool for an hour. You know, we need to get out. You're making everybody late. Like, we just start to get really revved up and reactive, which only leads to more power struggle from the child and lack of connection when we're all like, you can't open any parenting Instagram anything about like the importance of connection, but you can really only stay connected in a loving way if you stay in charge, because once you're not in charge, that's when parents start to lose it. And it's that reactivity that is so detrimental, both to the child and the parent. So that's two, right? My child's misbehaving on purpose. I can control and should be able to like make my child, right? And remember, guys, like, we're not going to be able to get into all of this today, but like, you can't make them eat, make them fall asleep, make them sit at the dinner table, make them pee or poop on the potty. Like, those are physiological endeavors that only they can do. Your power is in how you respond to those situations. And, you know, hopefully we can get into more of that, but there's tons of this in the book. Every chapter plays out these scenarios like I'm sharing now in great, great detail, so you can see sort of how these things unfold and how to apply the mind shift. So another mind shift you're going to start to see that the mind shifts are all very interrelated. Often 3 or 4 of them are at play at the same time. So the next one is children are strategic, not manipulative. Because most parents come into my office saying things like, you know, I've got a fascist dictator living in my home. Or my favorite was the dad who said, my child's extorting me. Like he'll only come to the breakfast table if he can watch Paw Patrol on the tablet. He's extorting me. So the mind shift is like, kids are strategic. It is in their DNA to go after what they want. They're not misbehaving. It's our job as the adults to help them understand where the limits and boundaries are. But if you see your child being manipulated, if you see it as manipulation, again, that's when you go down a path where you're revved up, you're upset because you feel like you have a fascist dictator on your hands and you're worried about it, which often comes out in a lot of anger, right? And you can see the cascade, right? If you don't do this right now, and then the threats come and the bribery and the bargaining, and that completely leaves your child in control, which is not where they're supposed to be. Yes, lots and lots of choices, lots and lots of validating and exploring emotions, but within limits, right? I had 2 moms I worked with who had a really feisty 4-year-old girl, and they said, you know, we were so focused on helping her efficacy and agency and giving her tons of choices. And now she thinks she's an equity partner. They were attorneys. Okay. So like you could see, get it, like the fine line that you mentioned earlier, Paige, about like being loving and connected and giving kids choices, but staying in charge is really the line we're fine. Like that's really where my work is with families. And the dream is possible. It is possible to be connected and be loving and also set clear limits and boundaries. But if you see your child as manipulative, it's going to be very hard to get there because of all the negative emotion and the threats that sort of emerge that make it very hard to stay in charge, right? Because you're just reacting to your child. So that's another mindset. Another is experiencing difficult emotions is harmful to children, right? So what I ended up seeing a lot of in my work with families on home visits and, you know, through video was that a child would express a difficult emotion, right? Like, I hate my little brother. When's he going back to the hospital? And those feelings are so triggering and uncomfortable to us. Mm-hmm. And we worry about what it means for our child, that there's a tendency to immediately run in to minimize or cheerlead or take those feelings away or ignore them because we feel anxious about them. The problem is those feelings don't, like, that's just being human. Mm-hmm. Like love, joy, anger, jealousy, competition, those are all feelings that can coexist and are just part of being human. And the more you help your child express those feelings, the less they're going to act out on them. So that's another one of these, like, you see how it's all very counterintuitive. So much of what we're doing from these faulty mindsets like lead to exactly the opposite of what we're angling for. So if you want your child to be able to cope with his big feelings about his new baby, you know, minimizing it. Oh, no, you love your new baby. You're so lucky you have a big brother. That just discounts the child's feelings and sends him underground, right? He gets the message, I should be ashamed of these feelings. Mommy or daddy is uncomfortable with these feelings. And so I can't really share them with him. That you can see how that's actually what's harmful to kids. What's loving is to say, bud, I totally get it. Having a new baby in the family is a big, big change. And you have really big feelings about it. There's sometimes when you love him and there's sometimes when you wish he would go away, and they make total sense. We're going to help, we're all in this together and we're going to figure it out. So fearing the feelings actually leads to more intensity and reactivity of feelings and a lack of ability to help your child work them through. They've got to be on the table, and the child needs to feel not judged and accepted for those feelings in order to be able to learn to manage them ultimately. I'll go the other ones really quickly so we can move on. It's mean and rejecting. not to give my child what he says he wants or needs. That's really about the tantrum, like mommy, 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 just 3 more questions, or, I need you to cuddle with me for 5 more minutes or sleep with me. I haven't had enough time with you today. There's kids, again, remember, they're strategic. They know that pulls on heartstrings and it triggers you. And that's when things go off the rails. But what happens then? There's the back and forth. You're telling them to go to sleep. They're coming out of the room. You're getting increasingly revved up. Now you're like pulling them into their bedroom and they're going, oh my God, you're hurting me. And then you feel awful. And then you're like, fine, sleep in my bed, right? Like everything sort of like just fall. That's not healthy. That interaction is way more detrimental than saying, I know, sweetie, it's never going to be enough books. It's never going to feel like enough cuddle time. I love connecting with you. This is my favorite time of day, but it's also my job to make sure you get the sleep you need. And so we've had our books, we've had our songs, we've had our cuddle time. Now I'm going to say our special mantra, and I know you're going to do a great job getting yourself to sleep. And you leave, and we can get into this later, but I've come around to feeling that boundaries are critically important most of the time for the really feisty kids who come in and out all night, because what's the alternative? The coming in and out, not getting sleep, getting everybody riled up and angry and hating on each other is way more detrimental than providing a boundary so that a child doesn't have the mobility to get themselves revved up and aroused. And I remind parents over and over again, for 2 or 3 years, their child was in a crib. They were essentially like locked in their room, because it's so triggering, right? Like, who got into parenting thinking they were going to lock their child in a room? So I don't call it a lock. I call it a door boundary. And I can't tell you, I've never seen it not be loving and helpful, because ultimately the boundary's clear, the child adapts, and everybody loves each other a whole lot more. And bedtime goes from a really stressful experience. Parents don't even enjoy the reading and the connecting because they're just waiting for that moment where they have to say goodnight. And then, the cascade of, horror comes. Mm-hmm. So that's another big mind shift. Limits are loving. Mm-hmm. That's how children learn to adapt. Okay. Another one, experiencing failure is harmful to my kid. That speaks to parents whose tendency is to run to the rescue when they see their child struggling, because they don't want the child to feel bad about themselves. And they want them to feel confident. But ironically, running to the rescue is what makes kids feel incompetent, because the message we're sending is, we don't think you have the ability to solve this problem. And so I've got to jump in and do it for you, as opposed to the mind shift, which is, this is hard work and it feels really uncomfortable. And I totally get it. These puzzles are really hard. I totally get it. They can be really frustrating. Would you like to hear some ideas? Mm-hmm. What about, it's not that you don't give them ideas or coach them, but you're not doing it for them, because the idea is to help them see themselves as the master of their challenges. Another, providing clear directions and expectations is being harsh and dictatorial. So I went on home visit after home visit, and this is what I would see over and over again. Time to get into pajamas, okay? Oh, don't you want to go and have your bath now, bud? A lot of asking questions when it wasn't a choice. Mm-hmm. And when I ask parents why they do that, like, what do they think is really getting triggered for them? At a cellular level, they feel like saying something like, it's now bath time. Would you like to go in on your own, or should I be a helper? Is like, it's like being, they feel like it's being dictatorial. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the reasons kids do so much better at school than at home by and large is because it's like a military operation at school with these group settings. Like, the expectations are so clear. The kids love it. They thrive because they know exactly what to expect. There's no gray zone where, like, can I exploit this? And then they're like off to the races trying to see how much of their agenda they can push. And it gets, especially kids who often are in OT for dysregulation, absent a clear boundary, it's just a breeding ground for dysregulation. Mm-hmm. It's the boundary that helps them organize and make good choices and adapt, right? So giving clear directions isn't being a fascist dictator, it's being a great parent. It's not being an authoritarian, it's doing it lovingly and giving choices. Time to get in the car seat. It's a have to. It's my job to make sure you get to school on time. You've got two great choices. You can hop like a bunny or run like Roadrunner. And if you choose not to do that, I'll be a helper. I'll scoop you up. You may not like it. That's okay, but we still need to get in the car, right? Mm-hmm. So you can start to see how these are all right interrelated, but it's not like, do you want to get into the car seat if it's actually not a choice? And then finally, the last faulty mindset is, my child harbors malicious intent when she is aggressive with her words and actions. This is a biggie. So, you guys all know that kids are, when they're triggered, they may use their bodies aggressively or their voices aggressively, right? You're a stupid poopy face. Or my favorite is the kid who said to his dad, who wouldn't give him another half hour of, some Power Rangers or whatever, said, I am going to reach my hand into your throat and pull out your voice box and throw it away. So, kids don't necessarily always mean what they say. Mm-hmm. And if you take it at face value and get angry and punitive, it only reinforces those provocative, sort of out of control behaviors. It's much more effective once you see that the child is just off the rails in yellow or red zone and is just triggered. You can say things like that dad, instead of saying, you can't say that to me and that's it, and now you're in timeout. Well, first of all, that goes in the win column of yanking your parents' chain if you're all about control right now in your development, right? And we all know that any big reaction is reinforcing to a behavior. So while it seems counterintuitive, the best thing to do is just go directly to the underlying issue. I know, bud, you're really angry at dad right now for taking away the tablet. It's okay. You can be angry. I'm not asking you to like the rule. Why would I expect you to like me saying no to another half hour of TV? That's my job. We have a limit on TV. And if you need to be unhappy about it, it's totally fine. Like, very genuinely saying to kids, if your expectation is that they're going to like your limits and you're waiting for them to like your limits, mm-hmm. that is another sort of black hole. So I'm going to stop. I know that's like an incredible mouthful, but those are the 8 mindsets. And again, in the book, through the cases, all of this gets elucidated, and in all its complexity, how we solve the challenges once parents have made those mind shifts.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. And I know the parents probably have a gazillion questions. I know I had a bunch going through my mind and we were waiting until the end. So I'll make sure parents feel free to use the chat if you had a specific question you wanted Claire to walk us through, or you can feel free to unmute yourself if you're comfortable and jump in the conversation. You can raise your hands and I'll make sure to unmute you. Because we would really love your feedback and make sure you get something out of this that, you intended to get by joining today. One of the big things I'm sure you do a lot of as you practice these skills with parents, right? It's not just about learning it and trying it once. It's about repetitive practice.
Yeah.
Sometimes over a very long time. But how do you help parents get comfortable with what the limits should be? How do you help parents get to that point where they feel comfortable physically picking up their child to take them out of the pool or put them in the car, if indeed they are? And I imagine some parents are, don't want to take those measures. So how do you coach parents through
mm-hmm.
getting to that
point?
So
again, because so much of the time it's really us getting in our own way. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my work is a lot of reframing for parents and sort of helping them take that step back to actually look at the situation objectively. So let's take the pool situation. Where this family was at when they came to me and we unpacked the dynamic, it became abundantly clear that this was very detrimental to their child. Mm-hmm. That there was a lot of screaming and yelling. The dad behaved in ways he felt very contrite about afterwards. She wasn't learning any skills about self-regulation, and there felt like a real disconnect. So like that all went into the basket of outcomes of that. scenario, right? Making the pool so miserable that this dad actually started to think, I'm just not going to take her anymore, which would have been so unfortunate because it was such a great experience for this child. So what I say to them is, you have to ask yourself, what's the alternative? If you don't have an end game, if you're waiting, hope against hope for her to get herself out, you are in that deadly gray zone when you start to be reactive and behave in ways that are detrimental to yourself and to your child, right? Mm-hmm. So the reframe is, because you love and adore your child and you don't want to have battles with her, the only way to do that is to have an end game, to be able to have a tool that enables you to stay in charge in a loving way and out of that gray zone, right? The gray zone is where the boundary is not clear and there's all that dysregulation and, the child's just, using every tool in their toolkit. You're so mean. You didn't let me stay in the pool longer. You told me 5 years ago that if I did this and that, I could stay in the pool longer. Like, they start to get you crazed about, like, where are we at here and what was really the limit. So when I help parents see what happens if you don't have a clear end game, that's where the motivation comes from. And I do a lot of helping parents see that. Really, one of the ways I see my job, because I'm a parent, my kids are grown now, and I live with a tremendous amount of regret and 2020 hindsight, is not to look back 5 years from now and say, I wish I had done it differently. So I'm trying to get them out of their reactive mode. Mm-hmm. And that's when parents are able to say, okay, this may feel uncomfortable, but I do need to get you out because we need to go home, and it may feel uncomfortable. But if the parent at that point can stay calm, strap the child in the car seat, the child's kicking and screaming, they're not reacting to any of that. In their minds, they're saying, I'm just helping my child move along in a difficult situation. She's not doing this on purpose to drive me crazy. She's having a hard time accepting the limit. That's to be expected. And my job is to be her rock and also help us move along, not have us be a half an hour late to our next activity or dinner because she wasn't cooperating. You see? At the end of the day, I would say, Paige, that really the most important thing is not being reactive. Almost always, that's when things go downhill. And so I'm just going to add at this point that I have come up with a tool because these moments are so triggering. And, lots of people talk about taking a pause, but I actually find with my families that they need more. They need more of like a roadmap for in that moment, like your child's now splashing around the pool with that mischievous, impish grin where you just want to strangle them because they're driving the car basically, and you're not able to move your family forward in that maddening moment. It's very hard to think clearly, right? So just like we talk about kids going into yellow and red and their brains being closed and not being able to think clearly, the same thing happens for us. So what I came up with was this. If it's not life or death, so your child like isn't running into the middle of the road, this is what it would look like for that dad. He might be like, okay, so Maisie, I've given you a direction to come out of the pool. You're having a hard time following that direction. So I'm going to take a daddy minute to think about how I'm going to help us solve this problem. So you're really like sort of just sportscasting. You don't have to be a psychologist. You're literally just saying, oh, I've asked you to come upstairs to get ready for bed. Oh, I've asked you to put away your game player. I've asked you to, whatever it is, you just name it. And you say, I see you're having a hard time following that direction. I'm going to take a mommy or daddy minute to think about how we're going to solve the problem. And it's even better. The next step is for you to you're basically buying yourself some time to say, with this little scenario that's in front of me right now that I have to deal with because I'm the adult, what do I control and what don't I control? In this case, I would say, I'm the dad. I don't control her body. I can't like literally convince her to get her body out of the pool. So what are the choices that ultimately can result in us moving on that I control? And that's where you buy yourself some time to to the two great choices. Same thing with the car seat. Like either you do it or I'll be a helper, right? I do the same thing with toothbrushing. I do the same thing with, many, many examples laid out in the book. And what's great is if the dad does something like this. So let me think about it. So, Sophie's having a hard time following this direction. Sophie's a human being, so I can't make her get out of the pool. Like, only she can choose that. So I guess her two great choices are she chooses to get out of the pool. And actually that would save us some time. So then we'll have a few minutes of extra playtime when we get home. Or I could be a helper and help Sophie get out of the pool, which makes it feel kind of uncomfortable to us. And then we just won't have that extra time. And I will tell you that in practice, I would say maybe 50% of the time the kid just gets with the program, because like watching you play this out and not get angry and upset and thinking through and sort of talking about them in the third person very lovingly and respectfully, they will like hand over the tablet or just start cleaning up their toys or doing. But the alternative is you have an end game. So if she chooses not to, he has a plan he can execute. And so that mommy daddy moment is, I find, very effective, because you need to throw a monkey wrench into the process and you need to buy yourself time to think about what the two great choices are.
No, that makes sense. There's a couple related questions in the chat, and it sounds like parents are curious about that physical fight that might happen, or that complete meltdown when your limit has been reached and okay, now it's time to physically help a child get out of the pool or go upstairs or take the tablet away. One parent mentioned, how do you do that but also not turn it into a huge issue when it's time to go to sleep? How do you kind of...
Well, okay, that's right. So that's the thing. It's such a great question, because here's what I would say. And remember, I have all the empathy in the world. Like, I could regale you with stories for years about the mistakes I made in the 2020 hindsight. And one of that is the moment that took me years to come to, was that you can't expect your child to like the limit. If you're hoping that it's not going to be messy, there's going to be you're going to have a major expectation gap, right? So that's the mind shift, is like, so what I say to parents is, like, we have a moment where we just lay out the perfect bedtime routine that in the comfort of my telehealth chat, we all agree is awesome, right? 2 books, a couple songs, 5 minutes of cuddle time, a special mantra so your child knows that's the end of bedtime. And you lay it all out and you say to your child, this is exactly what we're going to do. I want you to know exactly what to expect. Once I say our special mantra, good night, sleep tight, can't wait to see you in the morning, mommy or daddy is going to leave and do my mommy daddy thing while you get yourself to sleep. I'm not and this is the biggie, guys, saying to your child, I'm explaining this to you so you know exactly what to expect. This is a mommy daddy decision. I'm not asking you to like it, right? You don't want to go down that trap of trying to convince your child to think this is a great idea for him to get the sleep he needs, because then he's driving the car, because they pick up on the fact that you want their buy-in, and that's their father to gain control. I'm not having any of it. I'm not tired. I don't need to go to sleep, right? So you prepare them super lovingly and you say, I'm still going to leave, and I know you're going to do a great job getting yourself to sleep. And then you don't react to the meltdown. The meltdown is part of their process. Just like, think about it this way. If your child was going to do something dangerous, right? Put his finger in the socket, no matter what, you would still set the limit. He might have a breakdown and you would say, I know you're really unhappy that I took that away. It's my job to keep you safe. And no matter what, you would stick to that limit and tolerate his upset. It's no different. I would argue, and it's not a talk on sleep, but sleep is such a foundational thing, especially for many of the kids that we might have.
Yes.
I personally have, many of you might have, if you're connected to Skills on the Hill, are kids who have high arousal levels, who are very reactive to being hungry and tired. So getting the right sleep is like a basic need. So once you get clear about that, you can say to yourself, this is loving. And if I give my child the chance to adapt, they will. And any family I've worked with on a sleep plan, and they all look very different. There is never a one size fits all approach, but it has to have some clear boundaries so the child has the chance to learn to fall asleep on their own and to make a new association that I'm safe and good on my own. So often it requires like tolerating the upset, making sure there's no dangerous things in their room, acknowledging their upset, letting them have their upset, and coming out on the other end in the morning. I've never had a child who was like angry or had like residual upset that you ended up setting a boundary. And usually within several nights, the system has completely turned around. So the long answer to your question is, don't expect it not to be messy. Like, it would be a very unrealistic expectation for your child to agree to this plan and not do everything in his power to protest it. So they're going to try every tool in their toolkit until they, they're going to keep hitting the boundary that you're not coming back in. Now, some of my families do things like walking past the room periodically to say the mantra, because it makes them feel better to know that they're letting their child know they're there. Like, we come up with whatever plan the family's comfortable with, but at the end of the day, it's not going back in and reading again or lying down again or continuing and perpetuating that cycle.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. There are a couple parents that have expressed just some concern, and some of these might be a little bit more specific, where a little more problem solving might go into it with someone like yourself or working with a therapist to come up with that plan. But what about when children are a little older, and physically we can't exert as much power on the child to help them in that way? How can a parent be a helper as an alternative to chasing? And we've got kiddos that are biting and kicking and some other aggressive behaviors that jump.
Right. And I know, let me just say in advance that, doing many of these sessions versus like doing my in-depth consults, I'm very aware that I may raise more questions and that I'm never going to, I can't give the most in-depth, meaningful guidance without because what I'm doing with families is detective work when they come in. We're putting together all, what's the sensory piece, what's the age piece, what's the temperament piece, what are the contextual factors? Have there been major losses? This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We do it after taking into consideration all those factors. But what I would say writ large is that the most important thing is to have a way to throw a monkey wrench into the reactivity, as I said before. So I suggest to many families I work with where the kids are older or bigger is in the moment when the child is completely losing it and they're being destructive, right? Cozy corners are awesome until a child is hurling Tonka trucks across the room or clawing at you or spitting at you. Many families I work with kids who get that aroused and reactive. In that case, I would both have a safe space. I would definitely say to a child, here's the deal, bud. Your feelings are really big. And sometimes when your feelings are really big and hard to manage and you go into red zone, you lose control of your mind and your body. I know you don't mean to be hurtful, but it's our number one job to make sure you are safe. I don't focus on the safety of other people. It's too triggering. Our job is to keep you safe. So your room is so awesome. This is your safe space. You make sure there's tons of Nerf related things and squishy things he can't be destructive with. And you say, that's one option, is you can have a safe space break. It's not timeout. It's not punishment. It's not telling them to deal with their own feelings like you read about. It's, I'm your helper right now. I'm going to help us all take a break. Okay. If you can't do that because you just don't feel like you can physically get your child to that space, then I would say you take your own break. And it's very, very powerful to say, bud, everyone's very intense right now, and I'm going to take a mommy or daddy break so that I can get out of red zone and I can be a helper, and you take your own break to throw a monkey wrench into your child's destructiveness. Like I said, it's complicated and messy. And a lot of times with families, we need a couple consults to really get to the point where the parents have a plan that's loving, but also keeps them in charge. Because if you stay in that brawl, like I've got a bunch of video that families have given me permission to share of, like, I've one of a mom with like a 5-year-old, a big 5-year-old, who's like literally wrestling her to the ground. And it goes on for like 20 minutes with her trying, and he's kicking and she kicks her in the head. It's so detrimental. In that family, what we did is she had her own safe space. And she said, when that happens and I can't help you calm down, I'm going to take a break because I love you so much. And I know you don't mean to be harmful. So I'm not going to let you be harmful. So again, I know there's probably a lot of you saying yes, but like, and we won't get to all of those. I do a lot of writing about it. So I've got a lot of articles on my website. And like I said, honestly, in a lot of these situations, we need at least a consult or two to really develop a plan so that you can reduce your stress and know in these moments that you have an idea of what to do, so that you can stay in charge and not have this like cascade of increasing intensity and stress.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And again, I think that's what's unique about the book is, while in some of these questions, there are a gazillion different directions we could go, and there's so much going on packed into, just a few sentences. But what you're trying to get us to understand here is our own mindsets and the mind shifts we can make, to remain calm and regain control. So, no, we really appreciate your perspective as it relates to this specific topic in the book.
Well, and especially in those moments, like if you do have a kid who's a really big reactor and gets very physical, I'm a big fan of, in a quiet moment, having these sort of like meetings. Kids love meetings now because they were exposed to so many during COVID, and and really doing a reset, like saying to a child like that, look, bud, you are an amazing guy. Like, you are so passionate, your own mind, your feelings and ideas are so big. And you point out lots of ways their passion and intensity are positive. And then you say, but when you're upset, like you get the red bowl instead of the blue bowl, or I won't let you finish a game because your video time is up. You also have very big feelings that are hard to handle. And sometimes they're so big that you lose control of your mind and your body, and you say things and do things that I know you don't mean. Like, I know you don't mean to be hurtful to me or daddy or your sister or your brother. We're going to keep working on helping you have ways to manage that. And here's how we're going to do that. So that the setup is, we're on your side and we get you and we feel you. Because one of the things I'm so concerned about with these kids who cross my transom is that when we get harsh and punitive, like, what's wrong with you? Why would you want to hurt your brother? It's so shaming and judgmental that it actually increases the child's dysregulation, and they have negative feelings about themselves. They see themselves as like the bad, hurtful kid. And we know the power of the self-fulfilling prophecy. It only begets more of that behavior. So what I'm really trying to do is help parents reframe what is really happening in these moments, so that, and then helping them find the tools that enable them to be very empathic and sensitive at the same time that they have a way to stay in charge of the situation.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know we've reached the 2:00 hour. We've had several comments where parents are thanking you so much for your time, and folks probably have to get back to work or get ready for school.
Right, of course.
So I wanted to make sure to tell everybody, Claire, if you could just share your website with us again for folks to reach out if they did want to have a consult or did want to read some of your awesome articles that are on the website. It's a ton of great information for you to share that. And then I also just wanted to throw out, a parent was asking about modifying these approaches for children that are highly sensitive. And I'm hopeful as they listened to the presentation, they saw that, this is absolutely applicable for children who are highly sensitive.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I very much have in mind highly sensitive kids, because anyone out there who has one knows that they are much more prone to some of these challenges because of because their trigger point for stress is so much lower. So they tend to have more tantrums. They tend to be less flexible. They tend to have a harder time managing their very, very big emotions. And so the website is just lernerchilddevelopment.com. And if you just Google me, Claire Lerner, it will come up right away. But I think, Paige, what I'll do is I do this for all the groups I talk to, is that after this, when I get a break, I will send you, Paige, an email that has a bunch of articles that specifically address issues we've talked about today. There's lots more there that you can peruse, but I'll call out a few, and especially my highly sensitive children's series that is specifically focused on how to understand and support highly sensitive kids. And then all the ways to keep in touch with me. Like, if you can follow me on Instagram. I have a newsletter that's free that comes out every couple weeks. And there's a newsletter archive on my website where you can see I don't know how many there are, probably at least 50 that I've shared so far. So I'll just email that to you, Paige, and you can email it to all the participants. And I don't know if you saved it, Paige, but I did a workshop on highly sensitive kids a few months ago. For those of you, if you still have it, Paige, you might want to share that also.
I sure will. I sure will do that. And before everybody hops off, wanted to make sure you knew that Claire is offering a free signed copy of one of the books for one of our lucky participants. So we will randomly choose a name from our participant list today and shoot you over a special little prize. We also are raffling off a nice prize pack from Skills on the Hill that will mail directly to your home. So we've got two lucky folks today that joined us that will make sure to follow up with you by email. And I'll make sure everybody has Claire's information. So thank you so much, guys, for logging in. Sorry for the confusion in the beginning. And Claire, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for your expertise and for being so thoughtful with this book. I'm really excited for parents to dig in and see so many case studies. Claire knows her stuff. She's been doing this for a long time, and it works for some of the most reputable, developmental organizations out there. So we trust her judgment and her advice. So
if anything, the best part of the book is that you'll see you're not alone. You will definitely feel very validated in whatever you're experiencing. So, well, it was great to work with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for having me, Paige.
All right, no problem.
Okay, bye everyone.